G'day humans, Chris Stead from Finder here. We're talking NFT games and the topic today is Champions Ascension. Now this has been pitched as a true blockbuster AAA game. It's going to provide a huge 3D overworld to explore, as well as PvP and PvE arena combat. These guys are aiming really big with this game, but can it deliver on the promise? Look, there's definitely some positives about it, but there's also a lot of holes in the information that's been provided. So let's dive in, take a closer look. Let's start by taking a look at the developer, Jam City. Now, these guys have been around since 2010 and they've actually got quite a large number of games already released into the mobile gaming space. And these things have done some pretty big numbers. Like I looked up one of them, which was a Harry Potter game, and on the App Store, it's got 4.7 out of 5 as an average rating from 1.1 million reviews. And that's just one of their games. So these guys are legit in that space. And if you know me, if you've seen some of my previous videos, you know that a developer with a bit of a pedigree that has launched games before, deployed titles into the world and been successful with it is a big deal for me. So they get a huge tick of approval on that side of things. The only thing I'm a little bit concerned about is their history is definitely with licensed products and definitely with mobile only games. So with this title, Champions Ascension, they are pushing themselves with a brand new IP and creating more of that, complex 3D fantasy world as well. So they're biting off a bit more than they've had to chew previously, but I've seen enough from what I've looked into the development history of these guys and the pedigree. Like the founders are, the co-founder also founded MySpace, so they've got a long history in the scene. So definitely big tick there. This is a developer that can make the game that they're promising to make. At this stage, there's a reasonable amount of information available on the website. There's even a bit of gameplay footage. There's not a heck of a lot available on the medium, but you can get a pretty good idea of where these guys are trying to go. So they're trying to, the whole conceit here is that they're building the Kingdom Messina, which is a big fantasy world. Now, there seems to be two kind of core gameplay parts to this. The first part is the arena combat, which is going to be presented in PvP predominantly, but there's also going to be some sort of PvE and dungeon experience as well, where you'll fight against NPC monsters and even get to boss battles. But the PvP side is what you can really see, and that's when you kind of got the NFTs fighting against each other in these coliseums, basically. Now, what I've seen so far, the gameplay that's provided so far is pretty rough. And they're not suggesting it's anything other than that. Like it's labeled as very much alpha footage or even more of a tech demo in many ways. But what it doesn't show, and then is not what clear in any of the documentation here, is it turn-based gameplay, like a Pokemon style thing? Is it like a World of Warcraft game where you're kind of clicking buttons and activating moves and spells as a cooldown thing? Is it completely automated where you're just chucking these two battlers on there and they're fighting each other? Or is it what I hope it is, real-time combat? Think God of War or For Honor, that kind of thing, where you're actually, it's actually skill-based and you're really engaged in that way. So that's not clear yet what type of gameplay they're actually going for there. Maybe they don't know, because as I'll go into a bit later on, they're very much a developer that seems to be developing a little bit by committee in terms of asking the community to be involved in making the decisions on the features that they want. So maybe they're not quite sure yet which way that's going to go, but definitely at the moment, it's hard to tell. It's very, very rough. And I have looked through, there's a lot of AMAs out there. I've tried to get through a few of them just before I did this video so I could present you the most accurate information, but it's just not clear to me what that arena combat's going to be like. What I did discover in one of the AMAs is the developer referenced the combat is going to be quite accessible, that people will be able to go in and play. They specifically mentioned the fact that it's not going to be like this thing where you have to remember heaps of combos. So it's not going to be like Tekken or something like that, where you really have to have that high-end nuanced reflex gameplay. So that much we can be sure of. And we do know that there's going to be some sort of leveling up. It's called Ascension, given the name, that makes sense. But we don't, what we're really sure yet is, what's leveling up, what stats these fighters have, and how those stats may impact the, combat ability or even the playstyle completely. Now, I should have mentioned at the top that the character that you take into these battles is called an Eternal, and that's your NFT. And this also ties into the second part, or the second kind of gameplay that I've seen from the footage so far, which is this 3D overworld experience, like a like a city that you can actually walk through as your Eternal and interact with. And someone has some sort of town building aspect. For example, the footage shows you being able to place a business or a house within this world that you would obviously lease potentially to other users or operate or earn some sort of income from. Now, it's not quite clear whether the other characters that you can see walking around in the village of the footage is going to be actual other players, whether that's got that MMO aspect. I mean, it very much has the fantasy aesthetic of a World of Warcraft or potentially a Fable. So it's not quite clear. I mean, there's definitely social areas, part of the overworld. For example, I saw a tavern listed, but it's not clear whether there's a big social aspect there, whether they're actually NPCs or whether they're actually other players, and what kind of role buying the land and owning the land or building something within this world has on the overall gameplay experience. But it looks cool, definitely promising and filled with a lot of potential. Now, I'm just going to bring up a screenshot which I've taken from a trailer, so please disregard the resolution quality there. But this shows you a bit of an idea of what they're pitching in the overworld. You can see a few of the places you can visit, which are quite tantalizing: Forge, Bank, Market, Upgrades, Professions, Arena. That type of stuff looks very much tied into gameplay. But the fact that there's a quest section suggests that there'll be some sort of goal-orientated gameplay outside of the arena. That might tie into the dungeons they mentioned. And what the hell is Revenge? That's really, really interesting as well. So it'll be very interesting to see how these areas play out if there's thousands of people walking around this world. Like, that'd be really cool, right? So how far are they really planning to go with this vision? And that's the unknown here, that I'm not quite sure. They're pitching quite a significant concept, but there's holes in the information they're providing, so I just can't nail it down. So when are we going to learn more about what's going on here with this game, Champions Ascension? Look, the roadmap suggests that we're going to have the combat in the arenas and the dungeons launching first in early 2022. Leveling, or Ascension as it's called in this game, will be part of that. And also breeding, and they're not calling it breeding, but there'll be some way of combining the DNA of the NFTs together to create new NFTs. That process hasn't been explained as of yet, but that'll also be happening in the initial launch window in early 2022. When we get into mid-2022, we're going to see some additional battle modes come out. They haven't been identified what they're going to be, but it's going to be more battle modes coming out. And we'll also see staking come into play. And it won't be until the end of 2022 we're going to start seeing the overworld stuff kind of come in, where the buildings and the gear and the crafting and that type of elements that we're seeing in that kind of World of Warcraft style experience are going to start coming into the game. Now, when I look at that roadmap, I've got my doubts. I can't see how they're going to go from what we've seen so far to something of that complexity, and in the space of 7, 8, 9 months that we've got going. It's February when I'm saying this now, like the end of February 2022. So I think that they're going to be a pretty tight fit to try and get all that happening in the game by the end of this year. So it might stretch into 2023. But yeah, that's the roadmap. That's what how they're looking to introduce the content for Champions Ascension. As for the NFTs themselves, the Eternals, they actually look really, really cool. There's a lot of variety, a lot of detail. The initial launch will be the Prime Eternals, and there'll be 10,000 of them, all unique. And from what I've seen so far, there's such a variety in size and shape and the detail on them. It makes me think that there could be classes and races tied into all of this as well, but nothing like that has been detailed at this point, so I can't be sure. Now, these tokens will have further utility beyond the game. They're talking about airdrops and access to special events and pets, things like that coming into the game that you'll get for owning a Prime. So that's playing into the value for those guys and girls out there who want to get in early with it. But definitely a lot to still be learned about the NFTs, is particularly how the rarity might play in. Is there rarity tiers? And also how the stats of each character may differ. What are the attributes? How do the attributes affect the actual combat? So like I said at the very top, the picture they're painting is very much surface layer at this point, and I need to hear a bit more depth about how this stuff's going to work before I'm fully sold on what these guys are trying to do. But yeah, on the surface, the NFTs look really, really quite rad. Also not quite clear at this point is the tokenomics. and how they're going to work. We know that the NFTs, the primes, will be bought with Ethereum. And I also know that there's going to be 2 different tokens associated with the game. There'll be the Diamond Hand token, which will be related to the battles and will be used to buy pets and gear and all that kind of stuff. And then there'll be a land token as well, which is going to be called Messina, so based on the actual kingdom itself. What's really interesting is that the developer Jam City isn't reserving any of those tokens for themselves at all. It's all going into the game, which is unusual. We usually see them hoard a little bit for themselves to, line their pockets. On top of that, they've said that they're quite welcome for third-party dexes to be hosting not only the tokens, but also the NFTs for the marketplaces, which is interesting. And I did hear something in one of the AMAs about them talking about the idea of gamifying the staking of the NFTs. I find this really, really intriguing. So the concept here would be, from what I understand, or my understanding of it, is that if you've got an NFT in Eternal, one of the champions, and you stake it, it could be brought into the game as an NPC character that's walking around since you're not playing with it. So I find that really intriguing as well. For those who own an NFT in Eternal, one of the champions, it's kind of clear how you can play to earn in this game, right? So you battle either in the arena against other players or against monsters in dungeons and beat bosses and complete quests, and you'll earn the Diamond Hand token. Now there's also the Messina token, which is part of the land side of things. And my assumption here is that by buying businesses and land within this world as those are used by players, you'll also earn some sort of residual token as part of that. What's really interesting is that there's no outright attempt here to introduce scholars or guilds into this gameplay universe. They're focusing solely on the gameplay, which means that it doesn't look like there's going to be much utility for your NFT in terms of allowing other people to play in your stead. So the rental and profit share arrangements, which we see in many other games, aren't going to be prevalent here in 2022 at all. And there seems to be some mention of it maybe being explored in 2023 if that's what this community wants. So which means you're probably going to have to be actively playing the game to earn anything unless this staking system, this gamification of staking, has some sort of residual passive income as well in terms of the way it's used in the game. So it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. What the developer has said though is that there will be a free-to-play element of the game. So even though it's not a profit share style arrangement of renting someone else's NFT so you can play it at no buying cost, which is what we see in plenty of other games, it sounds like you'll just be able to play elements of the game and experience and have fun just for the heck of it. So that I like. I think that's really cool. I think people should be able to just play your game. So we'll have to see how that unfolds once the game's finally out. It's early days yet, but Champions Ascension is looking pretty damn solid. There's a real proven development team behind this. The gameplay looks promising and there's a sizable community already rallied around it. I'm a little bit worried about the way that they're going about this kind of development by committee approach, where they're getting the community to kind of lead where the game's going. I know that's a big part of the decentralized experience and what we're seeing in a lot of NFT games, but they're so reliant on that at this point the gameplay looks rather directionless and lacks a bit of leadership. I don't really know what type of game this is going to be, despite the fact that there's actual footage out there for us to play, and they're anticipating releasing this within a month or 2 from now. So that's a little bit concerning, but still, clearly a game that has to be watched and followed. And if you can, I suggest probably getting in early on the ground floor with this one if you've got the money to invest in one of those internal primes. I'm Chris Stead from Finder. Thanks very much for watching. Make sure you tune into my other videos. And until next time, happy gaming. No worries.